All right, today we're going to dive into the story of one of the most celebrated and, honestly, one of the most tragic figures in all of Chinese history, General Ye Fei. We're talking about a military genius, a true national hero, and a man whose absolute loyalty would, in the end, cost him everything. His story is just so powerful it really blurs that line between history and myth.
So get this. This was the actual code of his legendary Yu army. Now you have to remember, this was an era of total chaos. Most soldiers were basically just bandits in a uniform. But Yu Fei, he demanded a level of honor and discipline that was just completely unheard of. This single quote tells you everything you need to know about the kind of man he was.
And that right there, that brings us to the central mystery of his life. I mean, if he was so loyal, so good at his job, and so loved by the people, why on earth was he portrayed and executed by the very empire he swore to protect? That is the question we are going to unravel today.
To really get the tragedy of his story, you first have to understand what he represents today. See, Yue Fei isn't just some guy from a history book. He is the deified symbol of perfect loyalty in Chinese culture. He's the gold standard for patriotism. And the most famous legend about him just captures this perfectly. The story goes that his mother, wanting to make sure he never ever forgot his duty, tattooed these 4 characters, Jing Zheng Bao Go, right onto his back. It means serve the country with the utmost loyalty. Imagine that, a permanent physical reminder of your commitment, etched into your skin.
So how did this incredible loyalty get tested out on the battlefield? Well, Yu Fei wasn't just handed some perfect elite army. No, he had to build one, to forge it from the absolute wreckage of a collapsing dynasty, all during one of its darkest hours.
You see, the Northern Song dynasty was in a state of serious decay. Their official policy basically valued scholars and government officials way more than soldiers. They looked down on the military, and this created this profound weakness, leaving the empire totally exposed to the rising Jurchen tribes up north, who went on to found the Jin dynasty.
And that weakness, well, it led to an absolute disaster. In 1127, the Jurchens just rolled in and sacked the Song capital, capturing 2 emperors in an event that's now known as the Jingkang Incident. It was a national humiliation. The entire imperial court had to flee south, establishing the Southern Song dynasty as basically a government on the run. This is the desperate, chaotic world that Yu Fei steps in.
So, this is how Yu Fei built his legendary fighting force. He took these disorganized, demoralized troops and gave them a radical new code. Harming civilians, that was a death penalty offense. Promotions were based on actual merit, not who you knew or how much money you had. And he led from the front, sharing the same food, the same medicine, the same hardships as his men. This wasn't just an army, it was a cause. And this new army was about to face the most feared military unit of its time. This right here is where Yue Fei's strategic genius really shines.
Okay, so meet the Tai Fu Tu, which translates to Iron Pagoda. Just picture it. These guys were the medieval equivalent of a main battle tank. We're talking heavily armored cavalry where both the rider and the horse were covered in thick, interlocking plates. They were a seemingly unstoppable wall of charging iron.
The Jin used this devastating 1-2 punch. The heavy Tai Fu Tu would form the main charge, and they were often chained together in groups of 3 to just smash through enemy lines. At the exact same time, lighter cavalry, called the Guaizima, would race around the flanks, harassing everyone with archery. For the Song military, this was a problem they just could not solve.
Until Yue Fei came along. His solution was brutally effective and, honestly, pretty simple. He realized you don't attack the armored rider, you attack the horse. He armed his infantry with these long horse-cutting sabers and trained them to charge in low to completely ignore the knights and just slice at the horse's unprotected legs. The second one horse in a chained unit went down, the whole group just collapsed into a helpless, tangled mess. For the flankers, he used trenches and spear walls to stop them in their tracks. Just pure tactical genius.
Now, with victories like these, you would expect Yue Fei to be showered with honors, right? To be untouchable. But his most dangerous enemies weren't the Jurchen warriors. They were the politicians back in his own imperial court.
The court was completely split. You had Yu Fei leading the war faction, who were all about taking back the lost lands and restoring national honor. But then you had the peace faction, led by Emperor Gaozong and his chancellor Qin Hui. Now, the emperor was deeply paranoid that a super popular general could be a threat to his shaky throne, And Chancellor Qin Hui, he just saw appeasement as the fastest way to lock down his own political power. Their goals and Yu Fei's victories were just completely at odds.
This whole political conflict came to a head with Yu Fei's arrest on completely fabricated treason charges, and his fate was sealed by three of the most infamous words in all of Chinese history. When another general confronted the chancellor and demanded to see the proof, the evidence of Yu Fei's treason, Qin Hui simply replied, "More shu you." On the surface, it translates to, "Perhaps there is," but its meaning is so much more sinister. What he was really saying was, "Evidence? We don't need evidence." And ever since, that phrase has become shorthand for total corruption and the abuse of power.
And on the basis of perhaps there is, Yu Fei was executed. He was only 39 years old. His death removed the main voice of opposition to surrender, and sure enough, the Song court quickly signed the Treaty of Shaoxing. They gave up all of northern China and agreed to pay a massive annual tribute to their enemies. A total humiliation.
But a story like this doesn't just end with an execution. In death, Yu Fei became way more powerful than he ever was in life. His martyrdom transformed him from a general into an immortal icon.
About 20 years later, a new emperor finally came to power and officially rehabilitated Yu Fei's reputation. All of his honors were restored, he was given the posthumous title Wumu, which means martial and majestic, and his body was moved to a grand tomb. The government finally admitted its crime, and that cemented his place as a national hero forever.
And history's final verdict? Well, it's literally cast in iron. At his mausoleum today, you can find these 4 statues of his accusers, including Chancellor Qin Hui and his wife, forced to kneel before his tomb in eternal apology. For centuries, visitors have spit on them and struck these figures. It's a form of public shaming that makes sure their treachery is never, ever forgotten. His legacy also weaves itself deep into the world of martial arts. He is traditionally credited with creating famous styles like Xingyi Quan and Eagle Claw. Now, modern historians might debate how historically accurate that is, but the legend itself remains incredibly powerful. The story goes that he developed Xingyi's spear-like striking for his officers and Eagle Claw's grappling techniques for his regular soldiers.
And his influence even stretches all the way into modern pop culture. In the beloved novel Legend of the Condor Heroes, the whole plot revolves around finding the Book of Wumu, a fictional military manual that contains all of Yu Fei's secret strategies. The hero finds it, uses its tactics to defend China. It's a literary way of showing that Yu Fei's spirit continues to protect the nation. Which really brings us to a final, thought-provoking question. What is it that ultimately shapes a nation's identity more? Is it the tangible victories won by a general on the battlefield, or is it the enduring moral power of a martyr's sacrifice? For Yu Fei, his unjust death created a legend of loyalty that has inspired China for centuries, a story that might just be far more powerful than any single battle he could have ever won.